In this class, we will discuss on two topics under internal control and audits. First, we'll focus on information technology and internal control, and then followed by the management responsibility on internal control and audit. So let's start with the discussion on information technology and internal control. In the modern days, use of IT in internal controls is no more an amazing or advanced stuff. In a lot of large enterprises, they have their IT department to monitor the information technology and controls for the operations. Even for small enterprises, there are many packaged software or software packages that they can purchase for their operations as well. So IT can be a valuable tool in the modern days when setting internal controls in two main areas. First, the financial controls, and then is the operation controls. They are different. Let me explain. For financial controls, this involves the IT department or IT being used as a check for the financial data in the organization. In other words, IT is applied or used for a verification in the financial data. And this could include ensuring the security of financial data as well, such as through the use of passwords and authorization to access the data. But it could also allow organizations to make sure that the financial procedures are followed. One example is many businesses have IT-based sales ledger facilities, and the system could be set to prevent staff making sales to customers who have already reached their credit limit. In other words, if a customer they don't pay or he or she doesn't pay back for the outstanding balances with the company cannot issue any sales invoice to the customer because it's already reached the credit limit if it's set. And it's quite easy for the IT to set this limit and alert the staff no more sales should be done for this particular customer because the credit limit is reached. And for operational controls, this is where IT is used as a control on day-to-day activities of the business. An example from the manufacturing business is the business may have automated systems that check each unit and reject any that are defective. In other words, the IT system can be installed into the production facilities to monitor the production and to ensure the quality for each product are checked and recorded. And next, we move on the protection of IT systems and software within business. Controls must also be put in place to ensure that an organization's IT systems are operating correctly and are meeting their objectives. And the term non-discretionary controls is given to controls that are provided automatically by the system and cannot be overridden or overridden, such as access to a database being password protected. So here, for the protection of IT system and software within business, is becoming more important, especially right now we have a lot of cyber attack or any IT issues in harming the operation of business. And these controls fall into two main categories. These IT systems and software controls. First, general controls, and then is information processing controls. For general controls, the focus is more on IT hardware or the device, for example. And for information processing controls, the focus here is about the software or the data. So let's go through the definition of two different controls. For general controls or general IT controls, it supports or these controls support the continued proper operation of the IT environment. It's about the IT environment, including effective functioning of the information processing controls and the integrity of information in the information system. Examples like the computer, whether it is locked, if no proper persons, or if a person is not authorized, can this person go into the computer system or computer to turn on the computer, for example? It's about the general controls. But for information processing control, it's about relates to the processing of information in IT applications. It's about the software, IT applications, or manual processes that directly address risk to the integrity of information. So let's go to the general controls first. General controls have, you can see here, 6 items. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So physical controls, hardware and software configuration, logical access, disaster recovery, output controls, and technical support. So let's see. For physical controls. Physical controls involve controls to avoid unauthorized access to computer equipment. So here is very important, because if any unauthorized access can be done, it is a disaster for a company, because a lot of confidential information may be leaked to a third party or unauthorized persons. This will also include safeguards against possible environmental damage to the computer equipment, such as surge protectors in case of lightning strikes or other power surges. Second, the hardware and software configuration. These controls are designed to ensure that any new IT is tested and installed correctly into the systems to minimize the risk of errors or damages to the systems. It's very important to have a complete testing for any new IT equipment to be installed, or even software. For example, if the new IT hardware cannot be integrated with the existing systems, and if no proper testing is done, and you just plug in the hardware into your existing system, the two devices cannot work properly with each other, then the existing system may be collapsed or stopped in operation. It is a big risk to the operation, because there's no one would like to see the operation system is down, it's not working, or it doesn't work because of the newly installed device, and a lot of damages to the business as well. For software, it is almost the same. If an unauthorized software is installed, you don't know what is the consequence. Maybe it's okay. Maybe all existing data will be corrupted because of the newly installed software. Then it caused a huge damage to your company. Third controls under general controls is logical access. These controls are designed to prevent unauthorized access to the organization's information systems. This could include password systems. So it's quite similar to what we discussed before in the physical controls, but it's more on whether any unauthorized access in the systems with the password or no password. So in a lot of companies, the systems or the computer need to, the user need to input the password in order to go into the computer system, because it helps to prevent any unauthorized access that causing damages to the company. Disaster recovery. This will ensure that the organization will be able to continue operating despite any adverse conditions. So what is the disaster recovery? One example is like a flooding or fire in the data center, in the storage of your data. It means that, like, if you have an office, you set a room for keeping your server and other database into the room, and maybe one day it is a flooding or fire. You don't know. There's an accident happened, and the hardware stored in the room was damaged. And how can you make sure the operation can be continued? Then it is a very challenging question to many IT departments as well. So they have to think about whether there's any disaster recovery procedures or controls to make sure even for the data center in the room was damaged, the operation will not be stopped because we have the backup. For example, if we have the backup, the operation can be continued while we need to take time to repair any damaged data center or data storage, so we can still have the operation given we have the backup in another location. And output controls. This ensure that the outputs from the system are both complete and secure. Complete and secure, okay? This could include controls over who outputs are distributed to within the organizations. So here the control is who should we deliver the reports, for example, and whether the system are complete and secure. And next, technical support. It is important that all the users of the organization's IT system are competent. It's very important. The staff are competent. Training policies and technical support for workers can be a valuable control as well. So here, technical support is whether we have a proper technical support to the staff in the organizations, especially focusing on IT systems. If our staff using the IT system, they are not competent, it is harmful to the organization as well, because they may causing any corruption of the data, for example, or any damage to the overall information system. So after discussing the general controls, and now we turn our view to information processing controls. As said, for general control, it's more on like the physical location, whether we have the proper security on those assets or computer equipment, as well as whether we have the proper logical access way for the staff to go into the system. And for information processing control, it's a bit different. We have 5 items that I'd like to share. Completeness, whether the information processing control ensure completeness, whether there's a proper authorization as well, identification, validity, and forensic check. So for completeness, has all necessary data been input? The first question that the IT departments need to ask about information processing controls. Completeness. Has all necessary data been input? And whether the data input by an authorized person or not. So whether data is authorized to be input. And identification means whether the information, for those who input the information, can be traced with the unique identity. And validity means that is the information being input by the user valid? Any unauthorized person can input the data. If yes, then the data is not valid. And forensic check is the information being input by the user mathematically accurate. So whether we can ensure forensic check, maybe we have to like to have a control like the batch total checks to ensure the forensic checks is done by the system. So after sharing with you how importance of information technology on internal controls, we discussed general controls, information processing controls, and then now move on to the management responsibility. For internal controls, management is very important because it's about the attitude, whether they are serious about the internal controls. So now let's look deeply on the management responsibility on internal control. And it is the directors or even senior management's responsibility to set up a proper internal control arrangements within their company. And this responsibility may derive from statutory requirements or from general corporate governance arrangements. There are two things highlighted here. One is legal responsibility, the other is corporate governance. I will discuss with you on these arrangements or two topics for management responsibility. For legal responsibilities, in many countries, the company law, may be different, but typically, all directors of a company are required by law to keep proper accounting records. So first one is keep proper accounting records to safeguard the assets of the company. Safeguard of the assets of the company is second thing. And hence to take reasonable steps to prevent. The key is take reasonable steps to prevent and detect fraud and irregularities. So it's the legal responsibility for the directors first to keep proper accounting records, and the directors are responsible to safeguard the assets of the company. So he or she or the team, the board of directors, take reasonable steps to prevent and detect frauds and other irregularities. So here are the legal responsibility for the directors. Even countries by countries may be a bit different, but the general principle behind are more or less the same on these three areas. And for corporate governance, in United Kingdom, the board of directors is responsible for the company systems of internal control. And it can be traced back to 1999 from the Turnbull reports. This report gives guidance to directors in the United Kingdom and especially in the UK Corporate Governance Code. So under this code, the board of directors is responsible for the systems of internal control, and in addition, it is the role of management to implement board policies and on risk and control. Management should report regularly to the board on the risks faced on the effectiveness of the system of internal control in managing risk. So based on the concept from the Turnbull report here, corporate governance by the board of directors, they are responsible for the systems of internal control, and they need to report all the risk faced and the effectiveness of the system. So let's go deeply on what on the task that the board should consider should do. First of all, the board is responsible for all the controls in the company, no matter it's financial, operational, and compliance. And the board should consider the following areas during annual assessments of internal control. For internal control, it's recommended to have annual assessments in order to have a good corporate governance. So let's see what areas should be covered. First, the changes in the nature and extent of significant risk since last annual assessment. So, for the annual assessment, the board need to think or need to check whether there is any changes in nature and extent in significant risk as compared to the previous annual assessment. So here is the first area the board should look at. And the second area the board should look at or look into is the scope of management's ongoing monitoring of risk. It includes the reports management have made to the board and any relevant work by internal audit. So based on the internal audit work, for example, the scope of management's ongoing monitors of risk may be different in each annual assessment, just based on the past year work or risk identification by the internal audit. And the third area the board need to consider is incidence of any significant control failings. If any significant control failings were identified in the past year, in the next annual assessment of internal control, the board should consider the incidence of it and may change for the whole directions on internal, for example, like the control areas, or need to have new control activities in a particular area. As I said, the board is responsible for all the controls, not just one. So include financial, operational, and compliance. And internal financial control done by internal audit may only focus on financial numbers or financial controls. So, but it's not the case, because for board it has to cover operational and compliance as well. So the board need to cover all these three control areas in the annual assessment instead of just one concerned by the auditor on financial controls only.